Okay, I'm here with Andrew Kotting and starting another session where I'm going to ask him some questions about what he feels video and film, what their role is in art, and why are they pertinent in any way? What's the difference between a sitcom and some moving images that are art? Where is the line? What is it that defines something as art and something not as art? And who are the people that influence you? All right, what are the things that made you interested in that medium? Maybe it wasn't someone, maybe it was just you.
There's a lot of questions you packed into one sprawling question there. So
not that long a sentence. I thought I did pretty well.
It was a paragraph almost.
Yeah, well,
but yeah, I think it's more for me. It would more to do. You know, what is art? You can always say what is art.
What is art then? Okay,
you know, it's
in the world of the moving image.
The world of the moving image. I mean, you can stumble across art when you're least expecting it. It might be a documentary. It might be a still image. It might be a still frame.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I'd go back and try and articulate my first experience of something that was slightly out of my knowing. Was when I saw Eraserhead, the David Lynch film.
Yeah.
And I'd gone along to Leicester Square. I think I was probably 17 maybe.
Yeah.
I think I'd read about it in City Limits. That's before it became Time Out.
Yeah.
I had a girlfriend that I was quite keen on. She liked the cinema. I think we'd been seen a couple of, I don't know, Jaws or whatever else had been out. We'd been going steady possibly for a couple of months. And I think I read something about it being strange, and then maybe there being a naked body in there. Not that I ever remember a naked body, apart from the embryos.
Yeah.
I went up there, and I think it's in a cinema that was normally would show porn movies. And albeit that, not hardcore porn, it wasn't Soho's Leicester Square.
No.
And film starts, never seen anything like it, didn't know what I was experiencing, didn't know what I was feeling, black and white. I'd kind of imagined that we'd be snogging and stuff in the cinema, but it became apparent to me after, 10 minutes that I felt uncomfortable, exhilarated, transported, and she wanted to leave. There was this kind of tug on me, on my hand in particular, to leave. And she sat through it. And then at the end, I think she chucked me because I refused. I said, look, I need to see that again. So she left the cinema, and I kind of hid a little bit. This is when you could, and people would come and look around. And then the second screening was probably 20 minutes later. And it had such a... It was branded on the brain. It was branded on the eyes. And I had no idea what it was that I'd experienced. And of course, David Lynch is an artist that works with film, and somebody that is very much a kindred spirit. I think his background was kind of fine art, and he stumbled again into making moving image. And in fact, Eraserhead, he was an artist in residence somewhere in California for almost 3 years. And he was very interested in making his paintings. He was interested in these atmospheric paintings. I went and saw a retrospective maybe 10 years ago in Manchester, at home in Manchester. And it didn't surprise me that I was really drawn to his work. All his paintings, which were little assemblages, had this kind of atmosphere about them. And in fact, he incorporated little light bulbs. You'd get on a kind of kids' railway set, and so they would be illuminating little bits of and it wasn't even canvas. Sometimes it was hardboard. So that in hindsight was a moment. And then I think I was at the Slade. I was doing an MA. I mean, by that time, I was already fiddling around with performance and documenting performances that I was making, sometimes on Super 8, sometimes on Standard 8, but just a way of recording performances, but then afterwards being able to manipulate and reconfigure performances. So they were documents. But when I was there, it was Tarkovsky's Stalker, which I think I'd been aware of, but one of the... Simon Field, who used to program for the ICA, he was a visiting tutor, and he was a bit like my salons, I guess. Every week you had no idea what he might bring along, but he brought that along, and again I was completely mesmerised, no idea what it was. But of course, I'm at the Slade doing an MA, and I thought I was an artist. I guess I still do, an artist that works with moving image, that's interested in moving image. But again, there was something about the atmosphere of that film that you couldn't put your finger on. And then possibly the following week or couple of weeks after, he showed The Colour of Pomegranates, which is filmed by Sergei Parajanov. And again, both feature films. And when you're experiencing moving and sound, that's the one thing that I guess that quite often, if you're talking about video, people imagine it's about image. But for me, the alchemy, the magic of the moving image, video, be it an artist that works with sound and image, it's the combination. It's the fact that something happens. There's an alchemy that happens when you're kind of in control of these elements. And earlier on you were talking about video, but one of the joys now being digital, you can bring into that mix so many other different component parts. An archive has always played an important part for me. So you're quite often bringing documentation of events. It might be mundane, it might be a summer holiday, or it might be steam engine, or it might be could be anything. Could be that noise of the
plane going over.
That might come onto my radar, and for no reason it feels like it might belong, and you try it in the edit suite now and you put it into the timeline. But all this is kind of after the event, because when I was 16, 17 in that cinema, Razorhead, I felt at the time that I was an artist because I was quite good at drawing and painting. So you're conditioned or preconditioned to imagine that you're on this kind of trajectory, art school, and I got A-level art. I did really well at art history. I was interested in art history. I was also very interested in language, very interested in text. And I guess when I read something like Beckett's Waiting for Godot, that opened the floodgates of potential and possibility, where words can create images. And maybe that's something that was happening in Eraserhead and Stalker and Parajanov's Colored Pomegranates, albeit that the language that is Armenian, so it's been subtitled. But when you're working with language as well, and when it's just words on a page, and yet this thing here, the mind, is converting, transporting, transforming these words into feeling. And it can be absurd, it can be funny, it can be bleak, and things start happening that are out of your control. So conventionally, going back to your question, what's an artist working? It's all potential. It's all stuff that you can work with. And nowadays, it's what are we now, 2024. It's all up for grabs, and I think there was a kind of puristic, slightly pompous idea for me when I was younger that I could document performances, and the performances were kind of important, especially if I was performing in public, if I was doing stuff, acting the goat, really, being an idiot in public, looking to maybe capture the reactions, and then taking the material back into the edit suite and then reconforming it. There was something quite exciting and exhilarating about having captured those moments, not as documentary as a as a happening.
Yeah.
But then you in the edit suite, you can play God. You can start experimenting. It's like a laboratory.
Of course.
I mean, you obviously know that also through advertising. Yeah. If you're looking to condense that into 30 seconds or 40 seconds, and you might have had a week's worth of shoot, and you're looking for those moments that are going to do the job that you want them to do.
And as you all know, you take a small amount of footage and you can edit many different ways and tell many different things from the same footage that might shock the person who was actually doing the performing, isn't it? It's you have the opportunity, as you say,
to reconfigure as many different times as possible, and it's the Nazis did it brilliantly with propaganda. It becomes propaganda for the message that you want to relay. And so that's kind of tied up. And then I started doing, after the MA, I kind of got into bed metaphorically with a guy called Nick Gordon-Smith, who was one of the technicians up at the London Filmmakers Co-op that then became the Lux. And that's when artist film video came onto my... And most artist film videoists were slightly pretentious. That's when the structuralists and there are theorists dealing with film as moving image, but they wouldn't allow you to use sound, and there was a very particular kind of trope of work that irritated the fuck out of me. But I was glad that I had been privy to it. And I'd go out to the Filmmakers Co-op to process Super 8, 16mm. They had these optical printers, so you can then reconfigure footage. You can zoom in, crop out, and then I'd process it with Nick. And all the time this was going on, they had the London Musicians Collective, free jazz, like 100 metres just in the building. It's an old derelict building in Camden, which they'd taken over. And that seemed to me to be the antithesis of everything I couldn't stand, that free-form improvising noises. And it always felt to me as if it needed somebody to be in charge, to take the good bits and run with them, to loop them, to create this atmosphere which wasn't chaotic and wasn't grating. And I remember, I'd been working up at the car I think I did an all-nighter. And I'd shot some footage in Madagascar and then also in Kenya and an old Bolex, and I'd forgotten to put in the filter. The filter holder without the filter means that you're going to fob a little bit of the film.
Yeah.
So I bought this optical printer, and there had to be a kind of freeform jazz session going on. And I remember just getting so irritated by it, and that's when I was fixating on image. But this sound was careering into 2, 3 in the morning. I don't know, they were doing whatever they were doing, but in hindsight, almost paradoxically, I want to be in control of the sound and the image, and then now, of course, earlier on we were talking about mapping, and then the fact that you can project onto the side of buildings. I'd done some open air screenings. I discovered the work of Tony Osler. I looked at Bill Viola, and suddenly artists, which is what I always would have described myself as, that were working with moving image, which wasn't about cinema, which wasn't about television. Mm-hmm. It was something else. And I think that's when David Lynch started, working, in some of this early kind of TV series. You realise that TV could also incorporate these elements that nowadays would be synonymous with the gallery. Mm-hmm. So everything kind of in the late 70s, 80s and right through the 90s when I was cutting my teeth was possible and up for grabs. And I think in a way that's what I'm doing now. It's everything I'm making is an approximation of what I think it could be. Because I'm a bit shoddy and I'm a bit impatient, I always feel that everything's slightly unresolved. But then in a way, I have the joys of hindsight, and I can look back to the early work, and I've been practicing for 40 years now. And it's kind of, that's, if anything, that's my voice. My voice is slightly... it feels professional, but it's not quite professional. A bit amateur, but not quite amateur. A bit home movie, but can also be incredibly big. It can be very cinematic. So you've got all those little tensions going on. But yeah, I'm an artist that works with the moving image, the still image, the animated image, that works in public. I've always been an artist that stumbled into these mediums. And in fact, when I was at art school, I just used to laugh a little bit. People with the easel still working in such an old school way. Why would you want to work with canvas and paints, oils in particular, that take weeks to dry, when you've got all this other potential?
I'm with you on that. But that's as much as the fact that, unlike you, I can't draw. Mm-hmm. So, but still, nonetheless, I look at it.
Yeah, but of course you don't need to draw.
You could be doing this and this and this. You don't need to be doing paintings.
Yeah, but you could be an abstract. My Dinos Chapman was one of the students at the same. He was a year above actually.
Oh, really?
And all he did for the whole Bruce Nauman, kind of just not Bruce Nauman, the guy with the straight edge masking tape, shades of. He was kind of like a murky op artist, but that's all he did until he got into bed with his brother. Mm-hmm. They went off to the Royal College, and that's when they hatched his plan to kind of conquer the world using the mannequins. And Jake in particular was always the one who was very confrontational. There was a kind of enfant terrible making people sit up and notice them. But Dinos, for 3 years that he was there, it was just hard. Barnett Newman, that's what they were. Straight edge paint. He couldn't necessarily draw. It didn't matter. He was an abstract expressionist, but in control. And I found it really redundant and uninteresting and completely boring, which is why it was a revelation when he left. I thought, well, maybe he had his kind of eureka moment. He thought, well, I can't spend the rest of my life just doing these fucking straight edge paintings.
The Chapman brothers, they did. Oh, was it fucking hell?
Yes, they've done
that.
That
was amazing.
A lot of great stuff. Yeah,
just extraordinary that show. Yeah, I saw Eraserhead when I first went to university. I went to the film club, and they had Alien, and then the next week Eraserhead. I remember, just like you say, seeing Eraserhead and like being, what is going on? This is like, it's uncomfortable and it's weird, but it's fascinating, and it's. And just like you say, it was just that whole mix of things, and walking out going, what was that? But one of the things I really felt I began understanding better what all this is about, interesting enough, was I think the last but one class of yours where you had the guy singing football songs in the woods.
Marcus Coates.
Yeah, in the woods. And something that...
Open Season, I think it's called.
Something that in a stadium, you're like, I get it. And you put it there and it just seems so bizarre and utterly...
Out of context.
And,
misogynistic, racist, sexist.
Everything.
That's the point, yeah.
Yeah. And that was a fascinating
experience.
revelatory.
Well, I think, art can still do that, you know. And Matthew Barney is somebody else that I think that... he kind of came onto my radar with the Cremaster series, and the fact that he starts with 4 and then he does 3 and then he does 5 and then 1 and there was something. Do you know Matthew Barney's moving image work? Do you know his work at all?
Don't think so.
Right, he's an artist that works with moving image, but he's also a performance artist and a sculptor and very physical, very athletic. Kind of came to art making very late. But then you chuck into the mix things like endurance, which is important to me. You chuck into kind of physicality, which has always been important to me. And he's finessed that, and he got picked up by a high-end gallery very quickly in America, and he's had his 15 minutes and just soared to the top, a bit like Jeff Koons, who came from nowhere. But Matthew Barney, I think, also introduces other elements. A bit like Joseph Beuys is somebody that had a big influence on me when I went and saw his work in the flesh, and some of his performances where it felt kind of dada and absurd and nonsensical, but he was really committed to what he was doing. And Matthew Barney's work also incorporates elements like it might be lard or wax, and it might be running up and down an old squash court with a ball, and he's just doing these drawings. They're called drawing restraints, and he'd have a stick with a bit of charcoal. He'd run back and do it again. And so he'd be documenting these moments whilst he attempted to just make marks in the corner of what looked like a squash court. And then he'd film it, so that would be part of the documentation. Then afterwards, he, in the same exhibition, so you'd get that. But then you might have him, beautiful shot, HD, and he'd be hanging onto the side of a yacht which is moving really fast, and he'd be like a harness, and he'd be just drawing with the same along the side of the boat. It'd be like Duran Duran, just doing the same thing like that, just drawing. And then the mark making was of no import. It was the physicality, it was the restraint, and drawing in these ridiculous, maybe in a wind tunnel, and all of those elements, both literal and conceptual, were things that fascinated me. And then he done various things. I haven't shown him in the salon yet, but there's a big dump truck which must have been a 50-ton dump truck, and it would be winched in the air, and the axle of the dump truck was spinning around like that because the wheels weren't just in the air because the crane was lifting it up in the air, and then he was laying underneath the sump, so where the oil would normally come down. He was naked and he had an erection, and his knob was painted black. And he'd put round the edge of the axle just loads of beeswax, which is like Vaseline. So he was just playing it up and down his knob. So you're just looking at a man underneath a dump truck being suspended. So it's talking about tension and gravity and pressure and sex and the organs. And you don't know what it is, that the messages that he's conveying. There are lots of mixed, nuanced, ambiguous messages. And in hindsight, that's what I love about Eraserhead. That's what I love about Stalker. That's what I love about Beckett. You kind of know that there's something happening. You know that the words mean something. You know that this naked bloke with an erection with this thing spinning around on his knob means something. And the blokes in the hard hats, it's a wide shot we'll cut to every now and then. I go, what's the guy doing? The guy's there. What the fuck? And it's the not knowing. It's the unfathomability sometimes of all these things that keep me entertained and asking of my own practice. What does it mean? What's it about? Why are we doing it?
Well, I was just about to ask you, why does it matter?
Because in terms of my own practice, because if I didn't do it, I would.
They're doing.
It matters because it changes the world. It changes the way I engage with the world, the way you engage with the world, and it's kind of political by being apolitical and non-political. So it makes you think about a lot of different things. Whereas if he was lying underneath there with an erection, with the Vaseline and the train, and there was a Palestinian flag sticking out, it can only mean that.
Yeah.
That's what it will mean. And you are trying to connect it with that meaning. If you remove the Palestinian flag, then in that moment, we're talking now, June 2024, it can mean anything. The tap dancer, Eraserhead, puffed cheeks, embryos being dropped on the stage, just stamping on them. They explode like, yolks and eggs. What does it mean? Is it about a critique on abortion? Is it? It can mean a lot of things, and it's when things sometimes you can it's so pregnant with meaning that it bursts. But it's that the nuance and the ambiguity that is the thing that keeps me going, keeps me asking of my own practice and other people's practice. What does it mean? Why do I feel like this? And I think in a way, if you can answer those questions, then stop making.
If you can answer them,
yeah,
there's no chance.
That's why you carry on making.
Funny enough, this afternoon, early afternoon, I read. I hope I can find the piece.
It's not the Quran, is it?
No, it's not.
Please don't read me any of the Quran.
No. It's I can't remember the artist, so I'm going to have to just tell you what it was I read. Oh no, here we go. It's an essay by Peggy Phelan, The Ontology of Performances, Representation Without Reproduction, and talking about an artist who took pictures down, let people see pictures, the people who worked there, then took them down, and then got them to write what the image was that had been there, and then put that up instead of the image that was there, and then put a small photo of the image next to it. And just say there were 4 or 5 people. Each person's interpretation of what had been there was entirely different.
Wow.
Entirely different. What you thought the picture was, and what I thought the picture was, and what that person thought the picture was just, nobody described it.
Were you looking at the same picture?
And I found that really fascinating, that I kind of understood then that actually just going to a gallery and seeing pictures on the wall there is almost some kind of performance. In that it's an interpretation. I go and I see this and it means this to me.
But in a way, it's also antithetical to your 25 years or whatever it was in the advertising business. Because you want everybody, in a way, to come away with the same message. You want something to be conveyed.
Well, that's why good advertising keeps things super, super simple. And in a horrible, listen, I'm not saying I like him, but in a super simple way, you think of the last election where Jeremy Corbyn every day had a different message, and the only thing that Boris said was, get Brexit done. In terms of advertising, Boris nailed it, right? Everybody would come away with it because it's so simple and simplistic.
It's an art form. It's an art form.
And there's an art form to that.
I'm thinking of Benson and Hedges. I'm thinking of Silk Cut. I'm thinking of Marlborough.
Yes.
In our generation, you'd say that, and there's an image that's conjured up. There's a colour. There's a rip. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
You can't get. It's the most minimalistic. It's like an art form in itself. When you can put up a bit of kind of purple fabric,
and people go,
and they know exactly what you're advertising. It's a game it's a contract you're playing with your audience.
But that has gone away, I think. Because it's so much advertising has gone to social media and stuff. Now it's much more about, I like Andrew and Andrew likes that. Therefore, if Andrew likes that, I'm going to like it. Yeah. Which is, they figure it works, but it's not that art form.
It's not like it used to be in the old days, is it, Andrew?
That's the problem. That's the problem.
No,
I know that's the problem. It makes you sound like a whinging old thing. But there was a certain beauty to just being able to, like you say, put up a purple thing and have people go.
There was a zenith, but now we're still struggling. We're looking to find our feet again. And you're right. It's about celebrity. It's one of those things. It's Orwellian as well. And this idea of cancellation and what you can, what you can't say, and if you're saying the right thing, then you're fine. And that's something that I've been thinking about myself at the moment. I've been writing a streams of consciousness. It's called Blabber Mind, and I take on the mantle sometimes of somebody that is more right wing than I would necessarily be, but it's invigorating and it's inspiring to have this voice that is critiquing all these leftist identity politicians, and they're kind of the gatekeepers of what you can and you can't say. That it's frightening, and it's almost for me.
The gatekeeper?
We are.
No, but I feel both sides are. Everybody's a gatekeeper all of a sudden, isn't there? And there's one thing you're allowed. According to most people, there's one thing you're allowed to believe. It's only this is right. And I'm not saying either side of it. I'm just saying that's the if you look on Instagram and someone puts something and then all the comments will be like, "Oh, and if you think anything else, either side. If you think anything else, then you're like, wow.
Yeah, it's the kind of nuance it's gone now, and it's the virtual signalling as well. It's you have to be seen to be saying the right thing.
Yeah.
But as a result, the elephants are growing in the room. They're breeding, and they're sometimes you can't get into those rooms because of the elephants.
Yeah.
Everybody knows they're there. Everybody wants to talk about it. You're getting trampled on by them, but nobody will acknowledge them because we're all too frightened to talk about them.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a stampede at some point very very soon.
Well, I think that there is to an extent. I mean, the thought that Trump will come back for a second time, which is it's entirely possible, maybe even likely, especially after his conviction. I think that will have only won him more votes.
And I think reform over here are going to come from nowhere. That's the thing. I think they're going to end eating into both kind of strongholds of Labour and the Tories.
So you think they're eating into it? See, when I look at reform, I'm kind of like, yay! The amount of votes you're going to take away from the Tories, it just guarantees that Labour will get it and get it.
No, but I think a lot of reform is going to be taken from the left as well.
Really?
Yeah, mainly because of identity politics. Maybe because the left are too frightened, to address the elephants in the room. Through fear. I listened to them this morning. I think their politics and their kind of economic policies, they're kind of like they're what you call red Tories. That's what they are.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
And the Tories have become kind of like blue Labour. So they keep interconnecting in terms of what their belief systems are. And rather than going on about, isn't it terrible that this is being the left, it's that they're letting everybody know we're going to be sensible, we're going to make sure that we're going to generate jobs and blah, 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 but no talk of giving to the poor and all that stuff that they used to bang on about. Mm-hmm. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, we'll sort that out. Because nobody believed that mantra. 2019, they just which is what Corbyn's mantra was. They said, fuck off.
Yeah, they don't believe it. No, ever since the financial meltdown, nobody believes it.
The system that we live vicariously by, is the best of all those evils. It works. Capitalism works. That's why we all kind of subscribe to it. That's why you sat there in your nice brogues, and I've got my old brogues on, and I can drive home in a car, and turn on the TV and watch whatever I want, stream whatever I want. It works. There's nothing else that competes with it.
It works to an extent, yes.
Yeah, but that's better. At least it works. That's the point.
Yes.
Unless we end up, we subscribe to, you've got Putin, or you've got China, or you've got India. A democracy.
Barely.
Yeah. Anyhow, we're not talking. That's not art. That's not talking about video making, is it?
No, it's not talking about video. But well.
I'm just a bit aware of the time.
It is a bit more political than...
I've got to go in a minute.
You have got to go in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll wrap this up for the moment, but I think I might want to come back and have another half hour with you, if that's all right.
What else did you want to ask? I can go off on another ramble.